Hey everyone, professional photographer Ian Plant here, and in this video I'm going to be joined by Gary Farber at Hunts Photo and Video, your photography gear experts, and we are going to discuss the most popular lenses, the lenses that are just flying off the shelves right now. These are excellent lenses and they're useful for a variety of photography applications. Every photographer should consider owning one of these lenses, so if you want to learn more, well then stay tuned. Hey everyone, we have a special guest today, Gary Farber from Hunts Photo and Video, your photography gear experts. Gary, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me on again. I've been in the photography industry for about 30 years now, going on my 30th year. But something that I just really got into last year and a half, it only took me 25 years to get, it only took me 30 years to get into it. But other than being a salesperson and working for Hunts Photo, I've now taken a passion in doing photography. My current setup is a Sony 7R Mark IV, a Tamron 150 to 500, and a Sony 70 to 200. And last year, so I just really fell in love with it. I shoot a lot of, I try to shoot more bird photography, wildlife photography, landscape photography. I love shooting texture, architect, sports photography, really anything. I've just fallen in love with it. If you want to see more of my work, you can follow me on Instagram. It's G Money Boston. It's G Money Boston. I actually just changed my Instagram account to G Money Boston. So you can follow me there. I really that's where you can follow me. I try to build a community page, share my work and share work of other photographers on my page. So go give me a follow there.
All right, well that's fantastic. It's always great to hear someone develop a passion for photography, especially if it's someone who's been in the industry for decades. So I'm glad that you finally got bitten seriously by the photography bug. Of course, I got bitten by the bug 30 years ago, turned full-time pro 20 years ago, and I still love every moment. And today you have brought us some goodies to marvel at, some really popular lenses. You basically took a survey of the most popular lenses that are selling in Hunts Photo and Video, and we're going to talk about a few of those lenses today because I think these are excellent pieces of gear that every photographer should consider. So, Gary, what do you have for us? I cannot wait to see this stuff.
So we have the Canon 100 to 500.
Okay. And that's for the RF system, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, so that is my understanding is that that's like an f4.5 to 7.1 lens or something like that.
You're correct. It's that lens. Yes.
Yeah. So, this is a lens that it seems to me is optimized for wildlife and bird photography, maybe sports photography. And so it's got a focal range that's ideal for those types of photography. 100 to 500 gives the photographer a lot of reach so that they can reach out and photograph distant subjects. But if the subject gets closer, or if they're photographing a big subject, like if you go on safari in Africa and you've got an elephant, for example, sometimes you need to zoom out and take a little bit of a wider view if the animal's bigger or is coming closer to you. So this is a lens that seems really optimized for that kind of photography.
Yes, it is. I mean, the 100 500 when it first came out people were looking for a more lighter weight lens. Before mirrorless, the 100 400 was really, really popular, but Canon really didn't have anything to compete with back the Tamron or the Sigma. So they finally came out with this lens, and it's been a really big seller. People have really loved it, and everybody that I've talked to have liked the lens very much, and they like the weight and stuff of it. So it's been extremely popular especially for bird photography.
That's actually a pretty small, lightweight lens, very portable, very flexible. And you're right that like 100 to 500 or 150 to 600 millimeter range has been really popular. I know that Tamron and Sigma, they came out with 150 to 600 millimeter lenses years ago, and they were very, very popular for the Canon system and some other systems as well. So it's nice to see Canon innovating in this direction. So I think it's a lightweight and portable lens. The only downside that there is with a lens like that is that it's not the fastest lens in the world, especially when you're zoomed out to 500 millimeters. You're at f7.1, so that's not letting in a lot of light, which means if you're working in low light situations or you need a really fast shutter speed, you got to bump up your ISO. So that's my biggest complaint for lenses that are in this class, is that they are a little bit on the slow side. But modern digital cameras handle these higher ISOs really well, a lot better than they did 10 years ago. So it's actually a lightweight, relatively inexpensive, portable, flexible option for a lot of photographers. And the image quality of a lens like this is absolutely superb.
So next, we're going to go with a Nikon 100 to 400.
Yeah, so this is a very similar lens. It's kind of aimed at that same category. So it's really going to excel at wildlife. It is going to excel at sports photography, bird photography. It's not going to give you as much reach. So this is probably better optimized for general wildlife photography, maybe not optimized for small bird photography, for example. So what's interesting about these two lenses when we hold them up side by side is that the Nikon 100 to 400 is actually just a little bit bigger than the Canon 100 to 500. And my guess is that the reason why is that the 100 to 400 is a little bit faster. So what is the maximum f-stop for that lens?
On the 100 to 4 Nikon is 4.5, 5.6.
Okay, so it's a 4.5 to 5.6 lens. So it's a little bit faster than the 100 to 500, and that's probably why it's a little bigger. So when you build in that bigger maximum aperture, that's a more expensive design, and it's a bit more difficult to construct, and it's harder to keep the weight down. So these are both really good lenses for wildlife and sports photography. The 100 to 500, arguably a little bit better for bird photography, especially if you're photographing smaller birds, because you get that extra reach. So it's a trade-off. All right, Gary, what else do you have for us? What's up next?
So the next lens is the Canon 24 to 70.
Yeah, and that's an f2.8 lens, correct?
That's an f2.8 lens. That is correct, yeah.
That's a very fast lens. And so the 24 to 70 lenses that are in the zoom range are really sort of general purpose lenses. They can be used for a variety of applications. They're popular for landscape photographers who are looking to photograph mid-range scenes. They are also useful for wildlife photographers when working with wildlife subjects that have come in close. And street photographers, portrait photographers, travel photographers love to use these lenses as well. So these lenses give you a lot of flexibility for a variety of photography subjects. They give you the option of going wide, so you can zoom out to 24 millimeters. Now, I personally don't think 24 millimeters is that wide because I love working with ultra wide angle lenses. But for most photographers, that's a wide angle point of view. And you also have the option of zooming in at the very bottom of that medium telephoto range, that short telephoto range. So the 24 to 70 gives photographers a lot of flexibility. And that big f2 point aperture is really fast. This is a lens that is optimized for hand holding and for spontaneity, making it perfect for street and travel photography, for that sort of thing. That's what these lenses are optimized for. And this Canon 24 to 70 millimeter lens has been around for a long time in other iterations and other designs. And the newest versions of this are optically superb, super fast, and just overall excellent performers. All right, Gary, well, what do you have for us next?
We have the Sony 70-200 2.8.
Okay, so the 70-200 2.8, this is a really great lens. So the 70-200 range is useful for a variety of photography applications. I know that portrait photographers really like it, especially with that wide open f2.8 aperture, because it allows the photographer to limit the depth of field and to throw the background out of focus so that you're having selective focus on your subject and you emphasize the subject that way. This is also very useful for doing intimate landscape photography. So for the longest time, I would always carry around a 70-200 millimeter lens. I'm not using one currently, but it's a really useful also for wildlife when you have closer encounters with wildlife. That fast f2 point aperture is really great when you need extra shutter speed. So it's great for sports and action and wildlife, but it's not necessarily something you need for landscape. So typically for landscape, I prefer the f4 version of the 70-200. And most lens manufacturers who make a lens in this class will do a 2.8 and an f4 version.
So on my end, the 70-200, I actually just purchased this lens about a couple months ago. And I've been using it a lot for landscape photography and also shooting sports photography, like hockey, basketball. And I personally love the lens. It's very lightweight. It's very very easy to use, and I've gotten some really good shots of it. So it was a good investment for me, and I'm glad I purchased it. We have the Sony 200 to 600, which is a killer lens.
All right, so this is a really fantastic lens. I've seen this lens in action, but you can see it is a lot bigger than the 70 to 200, which makes sense because it's covering a much longer focal range, 200 to 600. This is a lens that's optimized for sports. It's optimized for wildlife photography and for bird photography. And it's a really amazing lens. It's actually on my list of lenses that I would like to get my hands on. I actually use Tamron's 150 to 500, which is a fantastic lens, but it doesn't quite have the reach as the Sony 200 to 600. So I would like something that has that extra reach. On the other hand, the Tamron 150 to 500 is a bit smaller and a bit lighter. The 200 to 600 is kind of a beast. It's definitely in that size and weight class that I would typically call a super telephoto zoom. And it's not quite as big as some of the other telephoto zooms I've used in the past. Like when I was shooting on the Canon system, I had Canon's 200 to 400 millimeter lens with the built-in 1.4 extender, and that was quite big. I think it's a little bit bigger than the Sony 200 to 600. So the 200 to 600 is still comfortable enough that you can hand hold that lens, though I wouldn't want to hand hold it for long periods of time. So that's a lens that's going to be a little bit better with some support underneath it, like a tripod with a gimbal head or a beanbag or something like that when you're on safari. Gary, are you using that lens at all for your sports photography?
I have not. I have not used it at all yet. It's actually pretty heavy, so it's not definitely not lightweight. I mean, it's good, but I have not used it for sports photography. But I've seen being out in the field with photographers. I've seen a lot of people with this lens, especially for bird photography. I could see why it could be used for sports photography as well. But people that have it, I've heard great things about it. They really, really, really like it, and I've seen people be able to capture some really good shots of it.
Yeah, maybe you can use it to work out your guns, keep that upper body
maybe.
strength going.
Yeah. Yeah, like a lifting, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a really fantastically sharp lens. It's got unsurpassed optical quality. I think anyone who gets their hands on that lens for the Sony system would be very happy. And we've got one more lens, this one made by Tamron.
So this lens is a 35 to 150 2.8.
Yeah, okay. So this is the lens that I use as my primary lens for intimate landscape photography. And also I use it a lot for wildlife photography. And actually, I believe it's an f2 to f2.8 lens. So when you're at 35 millimeters, it's an f2 lens. And when you zoom out to 150, it's a 2.8 lens. And what I love about this lens is that it's very fast, which means it's great for wildlife photography if you're working in low light. And it also has a range that covers most of my photography needs when I'm shooting both wildlife and landscape photography, so I can pair it with other lenses. So for example, when I'm shooting landscape, I will bring my 12 to 24 millimeter wide angle zoom, and then I will pair that with the Tamron 35 to 150. And so that will cover my range all the way from 12 millimeters ultra wide angle to 150 millimeters short telephoto. I've got a little bit of a gap between 24 millimeters and 35 millimeters, but that's not really that big of a deal. So I can carry two lenses when I'm doing landscape photography using my ultra wide zoom, which is my primary landscape lens. And then when I have light on a distant part of the landscape or there's something intimate that I want to capture, I've got this 35 to 150, which allows me to zoom in and focus on the more intimate details of the landscape or distant details of the landscape. So it's perfect for just about all the landscape photography that I want to do. And for wildlife, I will pair the 35 to 150 with Tamron's 150 to 500, and that will cover a really nice range for me. If the wildlife is closer, I'll use the 35 to 150, and it allows me to zoom out enough that I'm almost at wide angle. So that's great for those closer wildlife encounters. It's a fantastically sharp lens. The optical quality is excellent, and it's relatively lightweight. So it's a little bit heavier than maybe like a 70 to 200 f4 lens. So it's not the smallest lens in the world, but it's still smaller than a 70 to 200 f2.8. And it really is a very versatile lens. I find that I use it a lot, and I find that it's really extended the range of the type of photography subjects that I am now shooting. Well, Gary, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you, as always, for coming on the program. And there will be a description with this video that includes links to special deals for the products that have been featured on the site. If you want to order anything, you can just go ahead and directly order from the site, or you can contact Gary directly. His contact information will be below, and reach out to him, and he can help you acquiring the gear that we talked about in this video or any other photo gear that your heart desires. Gary, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you so much again for having me, and I look forward to other sessions doing with you.
All right, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.